Hey everyone, this is going to be the first PowerPoint presentation that you will be looking at, and I'm just not sharing my screen right now because I'm just going to be talking a bit through this PowerPoint. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So we are just starting off with this really elementary concept of mark making with line. I hope that you had a chance to check out the page that was really scientific. It talked about the way our eyes work as it functions with our brain. And also I talked a bit about the developmental stages that every single human goes through from the very time that they're able to hold a pencil to a piece of paper to the time that they are 5. And so it's very interesting that there is an inherent desire to make marks. And it's also really cool that mark making exists. It develops with us being aware of the tools that we have, such as our eyes and our hands, but also develops with how often we approach making artwork too. So there is the development of what happens from 18 months to 5 months in the types of mark making that we're capable of creating. But with this design course, you definitely will hopefully be able to take that and actually advance it into a greater skill where you can actually be able to apply this to a lot of different aspects of your life. So we're going to, like I said, start with this very elementary, just types of mark making with line. So this is an artist that takes a really simple type of mark making, but she does a wonderful job creating what seems like a really simple drawing into a type of line installation. So Gego got really into using wire in gallery spaces. And I'll go ahead and share this link with you so that you guys can, or excuse me, you all can go ahead and check this out. But I love Gego's work. They're very, very simple, and they end up really creating a lot of value just with all of this really graceful attention to line and detail. Looking at it. Oh, I really love this one. And I like this one a lot because you're using gridded paper in this class. So I feel like this had a kind of stood out as a gridded paper line observation drawing that really showed a great use of detail and line quality, and also this very minimal use of space. There's this space, obviously this grid is not quite exact, which makes the grid more interesting, but it's still pretty on point with the sizing, not so far off. And then I really love this type of dotted line that is happening throughout here, and one's capable of following it. So Gego uses this dotted line to not only create a simple structure, but then with the movement of the line, oh, sorry about that. With the movement of the line, the artist is able to take our eyes up and down this vertical rectangle that they are drawing. I'm not sure really what the drawing means, but it does remind me of a building, obviously in shape. And I think there's some of this aspect of the drawing down here maybe speaks of a trail, but it is generally just very minimal and abstract, and it's not that figurative. But I do appreciate the attention to detail that Gego does work with just this really simple line. In this one, you can see that Gego is still working with a grid, but then also using some boulder lines here to make this rectangular shape. And then Also just really using, simply using a gray color with this black and white to cover about a third of this entire image or drawing, which helps our brain just move through the piece with this negative space here and this negative space here. It really helps our eyes move through this piece and have some quiet with all this busy line work here. Once again, really minimal, but a lot of attention to design and to line. And we'll go ahead and I always like to take a moment to look at some 3D stuff. I know this is a two-dimensional class, but I like looking at three-dimensional work as it pertains to just design, just because I do think that it can be fun thinking of this as being a flat object or a three-dimensional object. And I definitely think that that's where Gago got really interesting with using the wire as a line in a three-dimensional form, which from a standing back enough, you can definitely perceive it as a drawing too. There's sort of these sculptural drawings, actually, I guess is really the most precise way to talk about it. And I mean, the way that the wire is bent here is really quite beautiful. It makes the texture of a braid. It reminds me of horsehair. And I like to just break down Gago's work in this very minimal, reminds me of something, but it's very attractive. And with all of the lines, there's a lot of different values of grays being made. So that's something that you'll be aware of kind of as we go to. We're going to get a lot into talking about value in this class. So there she is, that's Gago. And we're just going to start with this elementary concept of just the way that lines can move as mark making on a piece of paper. So obviously there are vertical lines. They're straight up and down lines that are moving in space without any slant and are perpendicular to horizontal lines. They suggest height and strength because they extend towards the sky and seem unshakable. So once again, they suggest height and strength because they extend towards the sky and they seem unshakable. So there is a relation to using vertical lines to make something seem strong and sturdy. Like I said, when we looked at that piece that Gago did, that very rectangular one, and just go back here. This one, this rectangular use, or excuse me, this vertical use of not only the lines, but also the vertical use of the entire picture plane gives it this sort of strong building-like sort of feeling. Oops. So horizontal lines are straight lines parallel to the horizon that move from left to right. They suggest width, distance, calmness, and stability. So when you are making horizontal lines, you can, the farther they go, maybe the farther away something seems. And so it's another designer's tool to know that you can use horizontal lines to create a little bit more space in a two-dimensional plane. Then there are diagonal lines that are straight lines that slant in any direction except horizontal or vertical. When in use, they suggest movement or lack of stability. So just even from this really simple thumbnail, I kind of have this sensation of sticks falling, or maybe one of you has a different type of sensation, but there is a general idea of movement when looking at this simple thumbnail. So not only is it just because the designer who made this thumbnail used different diagonal lines, but also they chose to use thicker lines and thinner lines with some medium and in the middle, and they all come to these points. They come to these points where they're almost touching, and so it gives us the sensation that it's up in the air, it's moving down, because they're all sort of angled down in this direction as well. So as we go on through this class, you'll definitely hear me talking about how different pieces evoke movement, which I think is obviously maybe a little bit more advanced than just vertical or horizontal lines. The next type of line is a zigzag line. These are a series of diagonal lines joined at ends. They can convey action and excitement as well as restlessness and anxiety. So if you think about just common symbols or even like emojis or something, such as the lightning bolt, if you just think of a general shape of a lightning bolt, that definitely obviously always is read in our mind as electricity, as there's vibrancy, that there is a lot of energy. And so it's very kind of crazy, I think, how like it's one of those, what came first, like the chicken or the egg? Like, did a lightning bolt come before the drawing of a lightning bolt, or were we already trying to capture energy with this type of line work, which relates to the understanding or the finding of electricity later on? It's very interesting to think of this just really simple mark that is a horizontal, the zigzag mark, as it relates to how we break down energy and lightning, or just any sort of energy systems that we are visualizing and seeing every day. So there is so much power to the line, and it can really encompass such great meaning. Curved lines are lines that bend and change direction gradually. They can be simply wavy or spiral. Such lines convey the feelings of comfort and ease, as well as sensual quality, as they remind us of the human body. That's apparent in this shape here. I definitely see a profile figure of a woman. This looks like a belly and like a breast. And there's also there's definitely a sensuousness with this type of wavy line, which obviously, that waves like this remind me of things that I would find in nature, or ocean waves. And this also has sort of this nurturing and comforting sort of aspect to it. While this is a very, very common hieroglyphic symbol of the spiral that's been used in every single ancient culture of humankind to evoke infinity, or also to evoke a type of hypnotism, which hypnotism is used as therapy. It can be used to calm us, to help you break bad habits, to help change your character. So if you are trying to evoke any sort of that round, figurative, or relaxing, organic, or hypnotic type of feeling, you would simply just start with using curved lines. So when you are making these lines, you can become more like, or work more like Gego, who was the example of the wire sculpture artist that we just looked at, and add a little bit of variation to that type of line. And this is all within your capacity of being really in tune excuse me, really in tune with the motor skills of your hand to create a variation of line within your mark making. So there's the style of lines refers to continuous, dotted, dashed, or implied lines. Continuous or implied lines are great for leading the eye of the viewer in the direction you want them to go. Dashed or dotted lines are great for patterns, energy, and calling for attention. So this continuous line is an implied line. It would be something that would, continuous. Calling of attention, okay, and also using it. So yes, as I was saying, you can use this line as an artist to create direction throughout a two-dimensional field. And if you think of just these patterned lines, or dashed or dotted lines, which create patterns, are great for calling energy and for calling attention. So even as I'm looking at these lines, I think of the common road and the dotted line on the road that is supposed to bring up attention, it's easier to spot and see with that type of line to make sure people are paying attention to what side of the road they're supposed to be on, calling for energy and attention. Texture in lines defines how smooth or rough it is. Varying, it can simply mean changing your working medium. For example, going from marker to charcoal or changing your digital brush. So the texture of a line is very obvious. It's very clean here. It goes from clean to getting rather smudged and also losing some of its black value and getting a little bit more towards a darker gray value. But yes, as it says, you can definitely control the types of marks, which I think is really fun to do as a designer and artist, to have different examples of these types of lines within one example of work, which I will be showing you more of. But these can be really fun to use with different tools. So like a really sharp pencil can make a super sharp line. And then a really higher grade pencil that is really thick with lead, you can make that mark and then use your finger to kind of smudge over it to get that type of effect. And I think this is all definitely well worth knowing. Not one line type or texture is better than the other, but it's all can be used for what sort of sensation you're trying to evoke. So obviously there's clean versus a little bit more mysterious versus rough versus, I mean, I feel like that's fairly clean, maybe sort of chalky. I don't know. I wish we had a classroom right now so someone could help me name this type of line. But anyways, that's an example of how texture works in your line. So then another obvious one is width. In a line, it goes from delicate, slim, lightweight to thick with strength, weight, and power. And honestly, one of the most fun ways to see these two lines is maybe in a combination of a drawing where they're working together, talking to one another and opposing each other. So you can use a super wide line versus a super thin line to arrange a two-dimensional design, or even to say something about the weight of a thing or an object or a person in your drawing. So the weight in line means the continuous change of width, which is what I was just actually talking about. By varying the weight, one can capture energy, movement, and even suggest when one object is in front of the other. As this line is very thick here, it thins away and it almost vanishes. It gets thick again and almost vanishes. So when you use a heavier weight, which would be the thicker line, when you use a heavier weight, it makes us feel like the line is coming forward, while if you use a lighter weight, and this is talking about the weight of your hand and the weight of the pressure of the pencil to your paper, if you use a lighter weight of your hand, you're going to make this line look farther away. So this is one really interesting, this is one way, one application you can add to a line and make a line just 100 times more interesting than just a straight line. And that is it for this really simple PowerPoint. The next PowerPoint, I'm going to be talking more about the way that line can evoke feeling a little bit more and how line can also function. So I hope you enjoyed, and this is just the beginning, so stay tuned.